give it up for Aaron Smith. Wow, I mean, there's a lot of people here. This is pretty impressive. I walked in and I saw so many chairs, and I said, wow, this is really going to be the next great American industry. We've been saying that for a long time, and now it seems like it's actually coming to pass. This is by far the largest number of people who've ever come to a business conference for this industry. And so thank you for being here and taking whatever risks you've taken in life to wind up here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. But I just want to take a real quick moment to just sort of collectively acknowledge the fact that we are sitting on soil where cannabis is legal. Even though it's been well over a year that this has been true, it still sends chills down my spine when I think about all the hard work and how against all odds that was passed, and that now everything becomes possible. When I first started in this movement when I was like 18, I was the Marijuana Policy Project's first volunteer in 1995. And basically throughout my life, most people had said that, I would tell them that I wanted to make cannabis legal, and they would say, oh, well, that'll never happen. Well, that's hopeless. And then would proceed to tell me all the reasons why making marijuana legal would never happen. It's the pharmaceutical company, the alcohol company, the this, the that, the parents, this, that, whatever. I mean, a litany of list of reasons why we would never make marijuana legal. And then something happened a couple years ago. Almost overnight, the storyline changed. And then when I told people what I was working to do to make marijuana legal, they would say, oh, well, that's inevitable. Huh. How'd that happen? I mean, and I think the commonality between those two approaches is that they both absolve the person of saying it of responsibility for doing anything. If it's hopeless, why do anything? If it's inevitable, why do anything? And I think it's really important to recognize that it was not hopeless then, and it certainly isn't inevitable now. The inevitability is birthed in everyone who's in here and everybody who cares about this cause. It's birthed in their hearts and in their wallets. This is only inevitable if people put their desire and passion into action and continue to donate, continue to take action, and continue to move the ball forward politically. If you donated your time or money to any of the political efforts of the past, can you raise your hand? Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Thank you for your effort and your energy. The only reason there is now a market for legal cannabis where there's money to be made is because people have gone out and, against all odds, worked to change the laws. And the future laws are only going to be changed with more of the same. And we've had just an amazing run recently. Want to acknowledge the recent House Appropriations Bill. For the first time, a body of Congress has said something positive about cannabis by blocking the DEA from spending resources, thwarting state laws. And it was amazing. I mean, even the most optimistic among us did not think that it was going to pass this year. Because Congress is always the last body to do anything. But they did it, and it passed by a 30-vote margin. I mean, people are really waking up, and people are waking up when members of Congress are actually on your side. What politicians and elected officials are starting to realize is that cannabis is a popular issue. It's a popular issue among their constituents, and so I think we're going to see more and more and more positive reforms. Also, let's give a nice round of applause to our fellow activists and business people from the great state of New York, becoming the 23rd medical cannabis state. Finally. That's been a slog for many, many years trying to get that passed, so it's good to know that there's something there. I'm sure it will expand over time. Also, want to welcome Minnesota as the 22nd state from a few months ago. And also, I think it's just worth mentioning that, well, I mean, it's a great thing, but, you know, is that about Uruguay. Beating the U.S. to the punch on becoming the first country to fully legalize cannabis for adults. That is going to... And so now it's not just here in the U.S., it's spreading. I mean, Canada's market's opening up. You know, Spain's looking at this. I mean, it's just, you go across the world, and it's just incredible because, and here's why. Because cannabis prohibition does not withstand the light of day. All we needed to do was ignite a conversation. And once that conversation got ignited, it spread in living rooms and cocktail parties across the world as people realized that cannabis is, you know, a reasonable adult choice with far less social harms than anything else that we let people do, and also with great benefit. And so I think it's a remarkable moment in history that we're all getting a chance to be a part of. And it's, you know, not just a political thing, it's not just a cultural thing, and it's not just an economic thing, but it's all three of these things we're seeing such a remarkable shift. And we've got some big, big things coming up just this year that could either continue this storyline that we're all part of building, or it could send it in the other direction. There are 3 ballot initiatives happening in November. Oregon is voting on legalization for adults in November. We also have Alaska voting on legalization for adults in November, and Florida voting on medical cannabis. And none of these 3 are a given. They are going to take a lot of energy and work, and we've got to win them. We've got to win them. We've got to keep this, this momentum going. And so I thank you in advance for anything you're doing or will be doing to help make sure that we succeed there. One of the best ways that we can all make sure that we succeed is by running great businesses. Running businesses that we can be proud of, that understand all the stakeholders that are at play, consumers, neighbors, the communities that we're in, the media, you know, investors, et cetera. And how you manage that is going to be just an incredible challenge and opportunity for this industry. It's not every day that a new industry just gets sort of started out of nowhere. Not that this is a new industry, but a newly legal industry. And so we have an opportunity to build something that's different, not just a new industry, but a new kind of industry. And so make no mistake that the continued freedom of cannabis consumers around the world is dependent upon how we all do business, because they're watching. You know, it's only a small percentage of the population that consumes cannabis. That means that we need the support of lots of non-cannabis consumers. In fact, maybe even people who not only don't like cannabis, but are opposed to cannabis, but understand that prohibition doesn't work. And so, you know, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to labeling, when it comes to our ecological footprint as an industry, these are things that you know, we all need to make sure we're paying attention to in all of the you know, the frenzy or the green rush that's occurring. And so I think that's important. So just out of curiosity, I'm curious who's here. How many people here currently operate a licensed dispensary or cultivation or infused product manufacturer currently? Great. And how many people hope to do one of those things? Great. And how many people here currently run an ancillary business in the sector? Great. And how many people hope to be doing that? Great. How many people here think you'll be raising capital for your business over the next year? Or hoping to raise capital over the next year? And how many people are looking to invest in a business other than your own this year? Great. Thanks. That's just good to get a sense of who is here. I'd also just say, we're all, I think money is one of these things that really kind of can galvanize people. And if you're here, mainly for money, that's great. And I think that a lot of people come to this industry because of the opportunity, the economic opportunity, but that's not what keeps them. What keeps them are the people, the passion, the change that we're making, the pioneering spirit that we're building. And because, this is different. This isn't, your businesses aren't like other businesses. And so I think it's going to be an interesting ride as we look at our different motivations for being involved in the sector. And, we learned this, that if you want something done in this world, you've got to figure out how to make it profitable. I like to say that the hippies keep being right? They're right about renewable energy. We're right about organic foods. We're right about cannabis. You look at renewable energy and organic foods, these are movements that started because people cared about something. They cared about the environment, so they wanted to use renewables. They cared about the health of of farms and the land and about what we put in our bodies. And it started out really small and with an activist sort of flavor. But once they figured out how to have profitable business models around those ideas, boom. Now organic foods are everywhere. Renewable energy is growing by leaps and leaps and leaps and bounds. And I think that's what the cannabis industry is doing for freedom. Every time we show communities that they can raise tax revenue, that they can have businesses that provide benefits to their communities, and investors can see that this is a viable investment opportunity, and as entrepreneurs see that this is a viable business opportunity, that moves things. And prohibition has been kept in place in partial part because of the profit being made by the people who make money off of depriving people of liberty. And so when you start a business that is where the outcome of your business is that people are more free as a result of your business, that is a very powerful, powerful act. So thank you. Sorry, lost my train of thought. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit about how I got here. And also, as I'm doing that, if you can start thinking a little bit about how you got here, we'll compare notes. The way I got my start in this industry / movement was I was a senior in high school and some friends played a trick on me. I was consuming cannabis for the first time, and I was always the paranoid one in the group. I was always the friend who was always like, oh no, let's not do that, or no, that's good. I was the one that was just like always nervous about these types of things. And so anyway, they played a trick, and they had a security guard come and get me and put me in a car. And then they came in, they were laughing, and they put their hand on the receiver. This was back when you had to push button down to turn the phone off. And they laughed and thought it was a big funny. But at that moment, it hit me in my core. And I realized that I can't believe people are punished for this. This is terrible. People's lives are being ruined. And they didn't know that they were building an activist that day. But here's the thing, for hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people around the world, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. People are sitting in prison right now while we are here thinking about how to make money. So we really owe it to them to make sure we do this right. And to really make sure that we build the right kind of industry. And so I was, back in 2010, I was the lead fundraiser for the Marijuana Policy Project. And I was raising money from high net worth individuals who were working on who are donating to change the laws, and also high net worth people who were working in this industry, in the dispensaries and such in California. And what I realized was that these two groups of people needed to know each other, because a lot of people were just donating to change the laws. They weren't thinking about any business opportunities, but many of them had money to donate because they'd been successful in other businesses. And then I was also noticing that there were all these entrepreneurs who had great ideas, who wanted to expand their businesses, who wanted to do things in this sector. But they didn't know the investors. They didn't know how to scale a business, or how to put together business plans with financials and all this kind of stuff. So I realized one day, I was like, wait a second, these people need to know each other. And it's also, I realized that I could raise a whole lot more money as a peer than as somebody that was just sort of asking people to raise money for the cause. And so I sat down with Steve D'Angelo, who runs Harborside Health Center, and he saw the same thing. He had all these people coming to him with different business ideas, and also investors coming, but he had no way to kind of vet the ideas, and nothing for them to invest in. And it was sort of like, yeah, there's something here, but I already have a job. And so I brought him this idea in late 2009, and he immediately saw it. And one of the things I'll say about Steve D'Angelo is, if you want to figure out what's going to happen next, figure out what Steve D'Angelo is doing now. He has been just an incredible visionary for decades, pioneering much of what we see today. He was doing before, usually whenever he's doing something, people think he's crazy for doing it, and then a couple years later, they're like, aha, Steve D'Angelo had the right idea. And so that was real great affirmation for my idea that Steve thought that was a good idea and was willing to become our first investor and our president. And so we started ArcView then with the idea that the development of a responsible, politically engaged, and profitable cannabis industry would be the single biggest factor leading to a day when not a single adult is punished for this plant. And so we've done a couple things. Probably the most notable is our investor network. We had a big meeting yesterday at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. And we had over 250 accredited investors and a dozen companies pitching them. How many people were there? Wow, I'm impressed that you're up this early. And I'm so sorry that you've had to hear me talk so much over the last 2 days. It was great. And over the last year, we've seen about $12 million invested in about a little over a dozen companies from these folks. And so it's really remarkable to see how it's been growing and the new waves of people who are getting involved. And the thing about being here in Colorado is that there's this fear that we don't talk about. When we talk about the punishment that happens around the world, we tend to focus on the people who are caught and are punished. But perhaps the greater challenge is all the people who live in fear about being themselves, about feeling like they need to keep things from their family members and these sorts of things. And so the freedom that people get when they walk to a store. I heard a friend tell me a story that they walked into a store here in Denver and went up to the counter, and the person said, "So, do you consume cannabis?" And he goes, "Yes." And they're like, "Great, okay, well, do you prefer this?" And started talking, but that moment of just randomly telling a stranger that you consume cannabis is a powerfully liberating act. The fear and anxiety that pervades millions and millions of cannabis consumers around the country, we get to solve. I think one of the reasons we're seeing so much excitement about the market here is because in a lot of ways, some people they're not just buying cannabis, they're buying a taste of freedom. And so it's a really amazing opportunity to be involved in this. And so that was my story about how I got here. And I wanted to just check in with your story. If you can just kind of close your eyes for a quick second. Think about the first time you knew cannabis existed. Think about the first time you knew someone who consumed it. Think about the first time you realized that people were punished for this. Think about the first time you realized that that was wrong. Think about the time when you realized someone benefited medically from cannabis. Think about the first time you realized there was a business opportunity in this. And the answer to that question is, all these questions leading up is kind of, in many ways, I imagine, how you got here. And I encourage, as you meet people over the next 2 days, there's a thing that we do at business conferences, right? We shake people's hands and we say, and you give your little elevator pitch and you say, "Oh, I'm thinking about getting into this space, blah, blah, blah," and you can have the exact same conversation 400 times, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually, find out the why behind what people do, and it just gets so much richer. It just gets so much richer. And so I think there's going to be a lot of really exciting opportunities in this sector right now. I think there's a huge agricultural explosion. I think we're going to see a lot of technology coming out where cannabis is going to be leading the way because of the uniqueness of this plant. Nobody obsesses over a plant like cannabis, consumers and cultivators, and so we've got all these underground botanists meeting up with the top plant engineers in the world, and I think what they're going to create is going to just be awesome. And I think that we're going to see a lot more in the, I think like Weed Maps and Leafly. I think these are going to be some of the first types of companies that we're going to start seeing acquisitions in. A lot of these ancillary businesses where there are companies that are very similar but in non-cannabis space. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more we're going to start seeing the first real acquisitions of companies probably in the next 2 years. And I think that the most likely place that's going to happen is going to be the media spaces, because it's sort of the most protected space and the most easy to sort of build into something else. So I think that's what we're going to start seeing first. I think we're going to see there's a lot of money at the table right now, and it's looking to find a place. But it's such a nascent industry. I mean, I hear from people all the time who are looking to put in $50, $100 million into this space, and it's just in many ways, it's too nascent, right? And so most of the companies are still startups or early stage companies. And so the money to build this industry it's here. And it's just a matter of figuring out, which steps we need to go through, because there just isn't a previous example of what's happening here. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next couple years as it rolls out. I'm going to be on a panel, my colleague Steve Berg is going to be speaking at 1 today about the ArcView market report, which is another thing we did. We did the first real big deep dive into this sector. We found that there's a $1.5 billion industry in 2013, growing to a $2.6 billion industry this year. That's a 68% growth in 1 year. find me another industry that is growing at that kind of a clip. And particularly, find me another industry that's growing at that clip that does not have a single player at more than $100 million a year business. I mean, in fact, there's probably only a dozen or so companies that are more than $10 or $15 million a year. This is a rare opportunity for startups and for small businesses to take a run at this before really big businesses start to come in. And so it's going to be fascinating. And one of the things that you'll hear a lot about today and tomorrow and in conversations is about the professionalizing of the industry, about how it's great, we need to professionalize this industry. I want to kind of challenge that notion a little bit. Yes, I agree, we want to professionalize this industry, but it depends on what your definition of professional is. If professional is what people wear and where they went to college or what their last job was, sure, that can play a role, right? But to me, professional means that you do what you say you're going to do, you honor the key stakeholders, including the community in the businesses that you do, and you treat people with respect no matter how long their hair is. And some of the most professional people I've ever had the pleasure of working with didn't look typically professional. And some of the least professional people I've ever worked with have looked like we normally think of when we think of professionals. So I encourage everybody to really open up the concept of what that means so that we can make sure that we're building something that can be a new kind of industry that really embraces. And that we don't lose the lessons of this plant and the importance of the creativity that so many people discover through it as well. I am going, you know what I'm going to do, because I got this message from Steve D'Angelo last night, and I was wondering, how am I going to close this out? And so as I was trying to figure out how I would close it out, I read his message, and I thought, you know what? Since this was supposed to be his speech, why don't I read what he wrote to me as a closing, because I think it's shockingly fitting. So I'll read that now, and then we'll close. He says, "Hello, my friends, fellow entrepreneurs and investors. I'd like to start by thanking Troy for stepping in to fill my speaking slot, and to Aaron for inviting me to speak. I'd also like to salute the voters, activists, and the cannabis community of Colorado for their successful effort to create the nation's first full-access adult use market. May many more states follow your good example, and soon. Unfortunately, a sudden flu has robbed me of the ability to present with you in the room today, but I've prepared a brief summary of the talk I was going to give. The cannabis industry is a social justice movement. It really could never be anything else, given the origins of cannabis prohibition, which had nothing to do with the inherent qualities of the plant and everything to do with the people who were using it. The very first law prohibiting cannabis in the US was passed in California in 1913, followed shortly thereafter by border states. Those laws were passed as a racist reaction to the first great wave of Mexican immigrants, fleeing the brutal battles of the revolution that started in 1910. This was just the beginning of a long and tragic history of cannabis laws targeting racial minorities and other marginalized people. It was those early laws and the myths that propelled them that inspired the theme of William Randolph Hearst and Harry Anslinger's nationwide propaganda campaigns. Once those campaigns produced their desired result of federal prohibition, some of the very first enforcement targets were black jazz musicians. Other early targets were tea pads of Harlem, which welcomed members of all races at a time when few, if any, other social venues were integrated. The decadence of Hollywood was also targeted by the anti-cannabis crusaders, resulting in the arrest of Robert Mitchum and others. And after jazz-loving beatniks picked up cannabis from African-American musicians and passed it on to the hippies, cannabis laws provided cops with a great reason to hassle anybody with the wrong kind of clothes or haircut. We started in 1913. What started in 1913 has grown into a monster. Just since 2001, 12 million Americans have been arrested on cannabis charges, and most of them convicted. African Americans have been arrested at a rate 4 times greater than that of white people, despite both groups having the same rate of cannabis consumption. Our nation now imprisons a larger percentage of its population than any other country, including North Korea. The majority of those arrested will suffer a lifetime of other damaging consequences, including losses of employment, housing, and various professional licenses. An equal or maybe even more serious social justice issue is the denial of effective medicine to people whose lives, in many cases, not those who provide medicine to patients who need it, it's those that prevent them from providing that help. Anybody that has looked into the eyes of a mother whose child depends on cannabis will understand this instantly. And we've not even talked about the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars wasted on cannabis enforcement or handed over to gangs and cartels, which has really been a form of robbery from society as a whole, a social injustice passed on every American, or the hundreds of people killed by police in the course of cannabis enforcement, or the tens of thousands killed by gangs and cartels. The good news is that our work to dismantle this engine of injustice is bearing more fruit every day. As new initiatives and new laws remove criminal penalties and create new markets, each cannabis businesses in those markets will reclaim a portion of the dollars stolen by prohibition. And as that happens, as we build our success, let's remember that our industry was birthed by a movement for social justice. The opportunities we are blessed with today are the result of many decades of struggle to change the laws, and our future is inextricably bound up with the cannabis policy reform movement. We must pass new laws if we're to gain new markets, and the passage of new laws in other states and other countries will not happen unless our industry funds them and pushes them forward. So, I encourage you to embrace the past and the future of our industry as a social justice movement. Rarely in human history have investors and entrepreneurs been handed such a large, well-proven, and completely unserved market. Take advantage of the unique opportunity we have to simultaneously build wealth for our families and justice in our society. I would be disappointed if all we did with this opportunity was create another successful money-making industry. I believe that the early pioneers had the skill and the dedication and the heart and vision to do much more. I hope that when we look back 20 or 30 or 40 years from now on what we have created, we can proudly say it is a new kind of industry, an industry with an ongoing commitment to social justice, an industry that will set a new standard for other industries to live up to, an industry with an active conscience, an industry unafraid to use its resources to defend our rights and environment, an industry that values doing good as much as creating wealth. Of course, it won't work unless we do it all together. But if we do, if we make that commitment, then when we do gather in that room 30 or 40 years from now, and we are congratulating each other on our success and our wealth, we will also be able to look in each other's eyes and claim the most valuable reward life has to offer any of us, the knowledge that we left this world a little better place than we found it. Thank you, Steve D'Angelo, and thank you. I look forward to building the next great American industry with you. Have a great conference.